My father was aspiring. So I think now I can understand why he wondered what in God's name I was doing.
Robert Plant, the powerhouse singer of Led Zeppelin, spent years crafting his own one-of-a-kind style. But even this rock legend had his breaking point with imitators. Plant didn't pull any punches when he felt his unique sound was being badly copied. Let's expose the very justification he unleashed for his stand. 1. David Coverdale, Whitesnake.
And that just crucifies personal creative impulse. But the circumstance is, you're dealing with the corporates of the biggest creature out of control in our lives, which is MTV.
One of the clearest examples of Robert Plant feeling less than impressed involves David Coverdale, the singer for the band Whitesnake. As Whitesnake became hugely popular in the 1980s with their powerful blues rock sound, Plant noticed something that bothered him. He felt David Coverdale's singing style and even his stage presence were strikingly similar to his own famous Led Zeppelin image. This wasn't just a small observation. Plant seemed genuinely annoyed by how much Coverdale appeared to be imitating him, both in how he sounded and how he looked on stage. Consider the situation. The 1980s were a period when Robert Plant was working hard to build a new musical life for himself. After Led Zeppelin, he wanted to explore different kinds of music and not just repeat the past. So you can imagine how frustrating it might have been for him to see another band, led by a singer with long, flowing blonde hair, a confident swagger, and a mighty blues rock voice, achieve huge success with a style that reminded so many people of Led Zeppelin at their peak for Plant. David Coverdale wasn't just inspired by him, he seemed almost like a deliberate copy. This feeling led Plant to reportedly give Coverdale the rather biting nickname David Coverversion. This clever, sharp label perfectly captured Plant's view. He saw Coverdale not as an original artist making his own way, but as a version of himself, an imitation lacking a unique spark. Plant's criticism went beyond just the sound of the music. He expressed that he thought it was in poor taste for another musician, someone performing at the same time, to so openly copy his vocal style, his stage moves, and even his appearance. It's one thing to be influenced by other artists. All musicians are. But in Plant's opinion, to build a whole career on what he saw as such obvious imitation was something else entirely. He had put so much of himself into creating that iconic Golden God image with Led Zeppelin, the powerful wailing vocals, the dynamic and almost shamanistic stage presence, the unique blend of blues feeling with hard rock power. To then see another performer seemingly take those very elements and repackage them for a new audience without adding much that was distinctly their own, clearly irritated him. This wasn't just about protecting his ego, it was about a deeper belief in artistic originality. Plant himself has always been an artist who values change and new ideas. As his varied and adventurous solo career clearly shows, he constantly pushed his own musical limits, exploring world music and different ways of expressing himself. So, to him, someone like Coverdale, who appeared comfortable working within a style so strongly linked to Plant's own past, likely seemed to represent a kind of artistic laziness or a lack of creative ambition. If a fellow rocker's perceived copying was a source of irritation, the arrival of a much younger guy sounding almost identical to his legendary former group would provoke an even more pointed. 2. Josh Kiszka.
It's the next piece, you know?
Right.
So, yeah, I'm super,
In recent years, no musician has received a more direct and public scolding from Robert Plant than Josh Kiszka, the singer for the band Greta Van Fleet. From the moment the band broke onto the scene, the comparisons to Led Zeppelin were immediate and impossible to ignore. They had the heavy blues-based riffs, the thunderous drumming, and most of all, a singer whose voice was a startling echo of a young Robert Plant in his prime. For some rock fans, it was a welcome blast from the past, a chance to relive the glory days. But for critics, and clearly for Plant himself, it was something else entirely. A copy, a mimic, an act that bordered on imitation. Plant's feelings on the matter were delivered with a sarcastic smile, but the words themselves were sharp enough to cut. The most famous comment came during an interview where Plant was asked about the new wave of rock bands. When Greta Van Fleet was mentioned, a mischievous look came over his face. He called Kiszka a beautiful little singer, a comment that sounded like a compliment but was dripping with condescension. Then came the punchline. "I hate him," Plant declared, before twisting the knife. He borrowed his voice from somebody I know very well. There was no mistaking his meaning. He saw Kiszka not as an artist inspired by him, but as someone who had simply lifted his entire vocal style. It was a clear and devastating critique, suggesting Kiszka had not bothered to find a voice of his own. To truly understand why this bothers Plant so much, you have to look at his own artistic path. After Led Zeppelin ended, Plant made a conscious decision to change. He worked tirelessly to move away from the high-pitched wail that made him famous. He explored world music, American folk, and quiet, atmospheric sounds. His voice today is a different instrument. It's lower, richer, more textured, and filled with a wisdom that only comes with age. To then see a young singer become famous by perfectly recreating the sound he made as a 20-something must feel like a bizarre and frustrating mockery of his entire life's work. It's as if Kiszka is a living, breathing tribute act, a reminder of the very box Plant has fought so hard to escape. Kiszka represents the jukebox version of Robert Plant, the one that people want to hear sing Immigrant Song forever. And that is the one version of himself that Plant refuses to be. He sees a young man with a powerful voice, choosing to be an echo of the past, rather than a voice for the future. And for an artist obsessed with moving forward, there is no greater sin. This frustration with being trapped by the past isn't just aimed at new singers. It has also been a source of tension with his closest musical partner. 3. Jimmy Page.
And I spent time reading and researching when I was younger.
The relationship between Robert Plant and Jimmy Page is one of the most celebrated and complicated in all of music history. Together, they were the heart and soul of Led Zeppelin, a perfect combination of musical genius. Page was the master of the riff, the dark architect of sound, while Plant was the voice, the spirit, the golden god, who brought those sounds to life. But since the band's end, their once perfect partnership has been marked by a deep and ongoing disagreement. Plant's frustration with his legendary bandmate isn't about his incredible skill with a guitar, but about his artistic vision. For decades, Plant has been fighting against what he sees as Page's powerful desire to look backward and constantly relive the glory of Led Zeppelin. This artistic tug-of-war became most clear in the years following the band's triumphant one-off reunion show in 2007. The concert was a massive success, proving that the magic was still there. For fans, and seemingly for Page, it felt like the beginning of a new chapter. But for Plant, it was the closing of a book. He had enjoyed the night, but he had no interest in turning it into a full-scale tour or a new album. He repeatedly shut down any talk of a reunion, making his reasons very clear. He had no desire to become a jukebox, simply playing the old hits for money. He felt a deep need to evolve as an artist, to create something new, not just repeat what he had done 40 years earlier. Every time he said this, it was an indirect but clear criticism of Page's focus on the band's legacy over the creation of new music. While Page spent much of his time after the reunion overseeing the remastering and re-releasing of Led Zeppelin's catalog, Plant was busy forging a new path. He embarked on a series of highly acclaimed and artistically daring projects, From his Grammy-winning album with bluegrass singer Alison Krauss to his work with the Band of Joy, exploring American folk and roots music. These projects showed a man who was still curious, still searching for new sounds, and still pushing his voice in new directions. He saw the past as a beautiful place to have been, but not a place to live. He seemed to view Page's focus on Zeppelin as a creative trap. The hate here is not a personal dislike, but the deep frustration and even sadness of seeing your greatest collaborator, your musical brother, seemingly content to polish old trophies while you want to go out and win new ones. It's the pain of moving on from a shared past, only to look back and see your partner still standing there, waiting for a history that you have no intention of repeating. Plant's critique of being stuck in the past also extends to his peers, including another legendary musician who built his own powerful legacy. Fourth, Lenny Kravitz.
And then I would, go to bed and put the joint out and fall asleep. I mean, it was all day long.
Robert Plant's expressions of musical disapproval weren't always delivered as outright dismissals or sharp, sarcastic jabs. Sometimes his comments were more carefully worded, acknowledging an artist's undeniable talent, while at the same time gently but firmly pointing out what he saw as a lack of true originality or an excessive reliance on the styles of past eras. This seems to describe his view of Lenny Kravitz, a musician celebrated for his retro rock sound that skillfully blends elements from 1960s and 1970s rock, soul, and funk. On different occasions, Plant has recognized Lenny Kravitz as a genuinely skilled and capable artist. However, he also hasn't hesitated to allude to the very clear and strong influences of past musical giants, including, at times, Led Zeppelin, that are woven throughout Kravitz's music. These observations often came with a tone that could be seen as a mild form of criticism, perhaps a kind of weariness with artists who seemed more focused on looking backward for inspiration than on forging entirely new musical paths forward. For Robert Plant, an artist who made a career out of constantly evolving and pushing beyond his Led Zeppelin legacy, this reliance on easily identifiable, overt derivativeness, even when it was executed with great skill and polish, appeared to be a point of concern. A significant example of this nuanced critique can be found in a 1993 interview Plant gave to Details magazine. When the conversation shifted to contemporary artists who were clearly influenced by Led Zeppelin, Robert Plant brought up Lenny Kravitz's name. I mean, Lenny Kravitz is a good artist. He's got some good things to say, Plant began, offering a measure of praise and acknowledging Kravitz's abilities. But he immediately followed this with a key critical observation. But his references are very, very apparent. This statement, while not particularly harsh on the surface, subtly called into question Kravitz's originality. Plant was essentially saying that while Kravitz was undoubtedly talented, his music often sounded like an expertly curated collection of easily recognizable influences from other famous artists, rather than a deeply personal and unique form of expression.
Mentally, spiritually, physically, and so I'm glad I'm still here, man.
To Plant, the seams of Kravitz's inspirations were a little too visible. Plant also had some very strong and clear opinions about new musical movements that seemed to challenge the very foundations of what he considered to be genuine musicianship. 5. Roger Daltrey.
Whatever we could find to burn, to be honest. It was freezing, it was very cold, it was later in the year.
Looking back to the 1970s, Led Zeppelin and The Who stood as two of the biggest rock bands on the planet, fierce rivals competing for the same throne. At the front of each band was a powerful, charismatic singer, Robert Plant, the mystical golden god, and Roger Daltrey, the tough, working-class hero with a microphone-swinging swagger. While a certain level of respect has always existed between the two men, there has also been a clear sense of rivalry. From Plant's side, the criticism has been less direct but no less pointed. It's a critique aimed not at Daltrey's powerful voice or stage presence, but at the very idea of the classic rock frontman, an image Plant has worked hard to leave behind, while Daltrey has continued to embrace it. In his later career, Robert Plant has made a very conscious effort to shed the rock star persona he helped create. The long, wild blonde hair is gone. The unbuttoned shirts have been replaced by more mature and subtle clothing, and his on-stage persona is less about strutting and more about connecting with the music on a deeper level. He has often spoken dismissively about the macho posturing and the vocal acrobatics that are expected of a rock singer. He sees that old identity as a kind of costume, something that was fun to wear in his youth, but no longer fits. When he makes these comments, they serve as an unspoken critique of those who have chosen to keep wearing that costume, and no one has worn it with more pride and consistency than Roger Daltrey. This isn't to say Plant dislikes Daltrey personally or questions his talent. It's a disagreement over artistic evolution. Roger Daltrey has, for the most part, remained the quintessential rock frontman. He still possesses that incredible, powerful roar. He still commands the stage with an aggressive energy, and he still represents the timeless, fist-pumping spirit of rock and roll. For millions of fans, this is a wonderful thing. He is a reliable and authentic link to the music they grew up with. But for Plant, it seems to represent a kind of artistic stagnation. He seems to believe that a singer should evolve along with their age and experience. By continuing to perform in the classic style, Plant may see Daltrey as someone who is refusing to let their art grow up. The criticism is subtle and rarely uses Daltrey's name, but the message is clear. Plant chose to tear down the golden god image piece by piece to find out what was underneath. He looks at his old rival and sees a man who is still proudly standing on top of that same pedestal, a choice that Plant himself could never make. His quiet disapproval of the classic rock persona became much louder when he looked at the next generation of rock stars, especially one who took the frontman cliché to a whole new level of excess. 6. Axl Rose.
All kinds of different reactions in the press and this and that. It was kind of like the only way to show where we've been.
Axl Rose, the fiery frontman of Guns N' Roses, has always been loud and clear about his influences, and Robert Plant's name is right at the top of his list. You can hear it in Axl's high-pitched, siren-like wail, a style that clearly owes a huge debt to early Led Zeppelin. But this admiration has never really been a two-way street. While Plant has rarely attacked Axl Rose by name, he has often distanced himself from the entire scene that Guns N' Roses represented. He looks at the hard rock of the late 1980s and sees not a tribute, but a caricature of the rock and roll lifestyle. And Axl Rose was its undisputed king. By the time Guns N' Roses exploded onto the scene, Robert Plant was already in a very different place musically. He was well into his solo career, moving far away from the heavy, bombastic rock that had made him a star. He was exploring more nuanced music, experimenting with different rhythms, and writing lyrics that were more introspective and mature. Meanwhile, the hard rock scene in Los Angeles was all about excess. The motto was relations, substances, and rock and roll, and bands prided themselves on their outrageous behavior. Guns N' Roses embodied this more than anyone. They were seen as the most dangerous band in the world, a reputation built on their wild concerts, controversial lyrics, and Axl's unpredictable and aggressive personality. Plant's criticism of this era is usually general, but it's easy to read between the lines. When he speaks with distaste about the cock rock phenomenon of the 80s or criticizes the lack of musical depth from that time, it's impossible not to connect his words to the era's biggest and most iconic figure. He sees a shallowness in the music and the attitude. Led Zeppelin, even at its most over-the-top, drew inspiration from ancient mythology. English folklore, and the deep traditions of the blues. Plant might look at the lyrical content of Guns N' Roses, which often focused on street life, partying, and personal grievances, and see a much less imaginative version of what a rock band could be. This is a classic case of an originator rejecting his own offspring. Plant helped write the book on rock star behavior, but he sees the 80s version as a cheap and cartoonish copy. For him, the wildness of Zeppelin was part of a larger artistic exploration. For a band like Guns N' Roses, he might see the wildness as the entire point. The admiration from Axl Rose was never returned because Plant likely didn't see a true artistic successor. Instead, he saw a student who had only paid attention to the loudest and most obvious lessons, while completely missing the subtlety, the mystery, and the musical curiosity that made Led Zeppelin so much more than just another loud rock band. Robert Plant, a voice that helped define a generation of rock, clearly values originality, skill, and artistic evolution, and his sharp critiques often targeted those he felt didn't measure up. His candid opinions give us a unique insight into the mind of a true rock legend. If you enjoyed this journey into Robert Plant's critical takes, please like this and subscribe for more.